Hey, thanks for attending our presentation. This is Crank Up Your Sitecore Authoring and Marketing Experience. This is a talk that Rick and I put together to inspire marketers and their developer teams on ways that they can enhance their Sitecore solution, whether they're going live with a new solution or they've got an existing one. A lot of things that we think will really improve the marketer's day-to-day life and make their Sitecore experience more productive. I'm Corey Smith. I'm a four-time Sitecore Technology MVP and independent consultant here in the United States. And I'm very honored and happy to be presenting with my friend, Rick Bauer.
The honor is mine. I am that Rick Bauer. Thank you, Corey. I am a Sitecore Strategy MVP with Proficient. You can find me on Twitter at Sitecordial, and I'm very excited to talk about a marketing topic near and dear to my heart, and that is definitely cranking up that level of what you can do and what you should be putting in front of either yourself, when you're ready to launch, or something that if you're working with customers that you should consider launching with. So.
Yeah, and one of the big themes in this talk that we've put together is really that we believe that Sitecore marketers and Sitecore developers make the best solution when they work in synergy with each other. So Rick kind of brings the marketing side of things, I bring the developer side of things, and I think that together we were able to come up with some really cool things to make Sitecore better, because after all, it's a marketing platform, but it's got to be built by developers.
Indeed. So let's dive right in, and I think there's no better place to start than really prerequisites, the elements that I think you need in place to be able to start getting the Sitecore analytics to work properly and to get to that road to personalization and proper testing. These are your marketing definitions. They are your building blocks, as the slide suggests, and this is, I'll call this a little bit of an alignment, because it really is the basics in some ways, but if you're not familiar with Sitecore marketing, this may be new to you, so let's make sure we're all on the same page. It's really a level set, but I want you to launch with a set of marketing definitions in place.
Yeah, and the really cool thing is, if you get all these marketing definitions in place when you launch your solution, you can actually go into your non-production environments. I stress non-production environments. Do not install this in a production environment, but you can go and install a module called the Experience Generator that's really cool. And what that'll actually let you do is simulate visits to your website in Sitecore, and you can actually kind of stress test your marketing definitions and make sure that they're producing the results that you expect and you're getting out of them in analytics what you want to.
Yeah, I would even hesitate to say cool on that. I mean, it is cool. I agree with Corey, but I would say it should be a requirement before you go live. You get these definitions in place and run a test on them.
But do not install it in production.
Do not. So let's take a look at some of these. So really, I want you to start with the basics, taxonomies. I'd call this more of a marketing taxonomy. I tend to refer to it as that. These are tags. This is metadata. This is a good way to basically start to build your analytics. Sitecore Analytics, in some cases, if you look at it and you don't have any taxonomy in place, you won't even see any data. It'll look like it's not working. The only reason it's not working is because your definitions are not set up. So definitely get these in place. Certainly consider getting a set of goals. This usually requires a bit of a goal workshop, but get those in place. You'll see some organization around that, and definitely use this organization. You'll see how I have on the top right hand side, and for goals and campaigns, you'll see some structure where I have page goals split up by engagement value, so 0, 10, 25, 50 points, 100 points. Certainly consider that structure. You can have categories, and if you have a multi-site solution, you might have it broken up by different sites. This will come into play a little bit later, and again, that's why these are the building blocks, but definitely set up some of that. And also definitely consider setting up an outcome group. This is something that you'll see under the taxonomies that will come into play a little bit later as well. Make a set of profiles, and you could consider persona, you could consider product line, you could, there's a lot of possibilities, and you'd work with a strategist to figure this out. But the nice part about this is where, when perhaps you're making goals, like I was talking about on the previous slide, those goals may be something that you start out with 10, 12 of them, and really just kind of put them in specific places that meet those high engagement value scored goals and high traffic pages to really be able to trigger and start seeing goals. That's something that you would use sparingly in the beginning. A set of profiles like personas are something that you can create and put everywhere around the site. You can kind of go nuts with that, where you may want to be a little more conservative with goals. This is where you'll use your content, and the content will be king in driving what kind of profiles you'll put on those pages. But you even may find gaps, that you have some personas, for example, that are lacking the content. Some other things you may want to consider when setting these up are definitely consider decay rate. This is the weight of that profile as the user quits the session and comes back, how much of that pattern that they will still contain, and the multiple with percentages setting. And this is something that you set on your profile card folder, which allows a author to apply multiple types from the different profile cards. You could basically apply 2 or 3 and set some percentages of how that content rates. There's more details on this. I have a YouTube channel that you'll see on the next slide that I walk through. There's certainly not enough time in this talk to power through all of those. So that's why we're going to deliver this slide at the end of each of these sections. We have several sections and several ideas on how to crank up your marketing, as we're calling it. And this is a slide that I would encourage you to take a screenshot. We're not going to go through all of this, but this is basically kind of talking through the previous section that we just covered, and in some cases we'll have links. In this case, again, somewhat shameless self-plug, but please look at my YouTube playlist where I talk through in detail each of the steps of setting up your marketing definitions. To dig a little deeper, we're going to talk about something that actually probably should precede your setting up your marketing definitions, but something that is way too often missed, and that is basically proper setup of workflows. You would be amazed, maybe you wouldn't be amazed, but so many times I work with organizations where everyone is set up as an admin, way too often, and this should never be the case. The only one that should be an admin is the admin. It's a great word. It should be kept intact, and have super users if you want them, but don't have the admin box checked for everyone. Lots of bad things can happen, and that can actually put your site at risk. So take time at the minimum to set up a super user and maybe a content author or a content marketer or some combination thereof. It will come in play with more than just control over the site, but also it will be necessary for content testing. So they can be set up by an admin, and you'll see here that we have a Jeremy Davis that is, we don't have checked as an admin because we don't want Jeremy to be an admin. We just want him to be able to do some authoring. So you'll see on the right hand side this member of these groups. And I will tell you, as a marketer and even somewhat of a Sitecore non-technical admin, these are not easy. These are not something that are intuitive.
Yeah, so we kind of put these in the deck just to make you familiar with them, but really, if roles are something that you want to be configuring on your users, you're going to work with your devs or your Sitecore partners to configure these, because as intuitive as the role names might seem, like Sitecore author, oh, I want my person to be a Sitecore author, so give them the Sitecore author role. What that role actually enables that user to do probably does nothing like you think it would, right? They might be severely limited with the Sitecore author role and need some additional ones. So I just recommend staying away from this. And if you want to set up roles for users, work with your partner, your Sitecore partner, your Sitecore developers to get it, because it can be tricky.
Absolutely. And just a quick visualization, a couple elements where those roles come into play. You'll see on the left-hand side a typical content author. It's really just the simple authoring tools, the media library, the experience optimization tool to set up and look at testing. Very basic. This is what most content authors would ever need. On the right-hand side is the full admin pane. So you can see quite a difference in the amount of apps that are available. This does allow for comfort for your content authors that they can't be digging into the wrong thing, and certainly the developers and admins will comfort that your content authors are not digging in. Another thing is the lock and edit option is not available to you as an admin, at least not as an alert. So it basically, this makes it a lot more controlled, where you won't have two people working on the same page at the same time. So adding in the proper roles and workflows will allow this to be in play. And then just as a visualization, in your system folder, if you open up the content editor and drill down to the system folder, you will see a set of sample workflows. The one aptly named sample workflow is a great place for your devs to explore the version of workflow that will fire up the test creation dialog. Again, this is that piece where I was saying, you need workflow in place in order to be able to test.
Yeah, and again, we show off the workflow fields here. You can see on an item on the right side. We show these off really just to kind of get you familiar with those fields and let you know that they're there, so that you can at a glance see what workflow your content is in or what state it's currently in. But again, I want to stress that you shouldn't be ever modifying these fields. And if you do think that you need to, again, reach out to your Sitecore partner, reach out to your Sitecore developers, because changing these fields can cause your content to get into a wacky state.
Yes, but you do need that launch test, and that's where this is going to come in play. If you've ever done a page-based test, you would have seen something similar to this dialog box that lets you look at the previews and start to choose metrics around your test. But as an admin, you would not see this easily. You'd have to kind of cheat it, if you will, to be able to see this dialog when working as an admin on a component level test. By setting up the proper roles and workflow specifically, this little approve with test dialog comes up and then opens up the actual control panel for setting up the test. So this will work, where page level testing will work for any user, regardless of workflow. You need it to access the component level test. One thing I would like to add is, much like we were talking about using the experience generator to get your definitions going, another thing you can do when getting going with testing to prove out that it's working properly, pick a high traffic page on your live site. In this case, you can use it in the live site and set up what I would call an instead of an A/B test, I would call this an A/A test. Basically, you want to be on a high traffic page where you can really know that there's some data coming through. But once you basically set up, you're testing one component against the exact same component, the users won't see any difference in content. So you're not going to break the site from a user content standpoint, but you will start seeing data between which item was exposed. Once you see that, consider moving to an A/B test, and then maybe an ABC or multivariate. But there is a nice way to kind of dig in that way. So, again, we're not necessarily going to read through all of these, but kind of what we covered here is just getting those roles. Please get those roles in place, and please don't let everyone be an admin. And then, like I said, just consider that A/A test. And we do. Go ahead, Corey.
Sorry, we've thrown in a couple of links at the bottom. You'll see the bit.ly, the SXA security setup, if you're fortunate enough to be on an SXA solution. SXA actually has a really nice wizard for setting up those roles that we were talking about earlier. So you can go to that link there, look at the documentation for how to use that wizard in SXA, and you'll get along running pretty quickly. If you're not on an SXA solution, again, setting up those roles can be a lot trickier because the names can be misleading, etc. The non-SXA security link that we have there, that'll take you to the Sitecore documentation that'll actually give you an explanation of what all of those roles do, what permissions they allow, etc. So give both of those links a check out if you're looking at setting up roles.
All right, so this next one is something that I really have wanted for a long time, and Corey came through on this big time. This is one of my favorites from this presentation, and this is where we really start to kind of move forward in the cranking up the experience out of the gate here with your launch. But that is cleaning up your goal selection list. So it's a long time coming, but you'll know that in the marketing control that I showed, in the marketing control panel that I showed you before, you have the ability to set up structure. You know, you have the ability, like I was saying before when I was saying goals for the value of 0, 10, 25, 50. And same thing with campaigns. I can have it by email, I can have it by PPC, influencer, social, etc. I can set up all that hierarchy in the marketing control panel. And basically you put that work in to organize your goals. And when you apply it to your, when you go to apply these goals, particularly to pages, or you can apply a campaign to pages for offline campaigns, all that organization goes away. So this has been a long time frustration for me, for many a client. But that's where we, I'll let Corey, this is your.
Yeah, so as a developer, to be quite honest, these page level goal controls, like setting goals on a page or setting campaigns, etc. This isn't really something that I ever do. Really, this is kind of the marketer's area of expertise, and so I wasn't aware of kind of the limitation of this control until Rick brought it to my attention. But you can see on the left-hand side, this is what the goal selector looks like for pages out of the box. And yeah, like Rick said, I mean, if you've got a lot of goals, if you've got a very intricate organization of your goals, like Rick had, where he was putting folders and denoting the goal values and things like that, it's completely lost with this checkbox list. So Sitecore already comes with a control out of the box, the tree list, which you probably know from some of your templates and items already, that can actually represent that folder structure. And so when he brought this problem to me, it's like, okay, well, why don't we just use the tree list? And that's what we've done. So you can see on the right-hand side, we've actually gone and completely rebuilt the goal selector and the content editor for pages. And this is what it looks like now. And gosh, I wish there was a lot more that I could say about it, but I think the pictures really speak for themselves. I mean, this is pretty nice, right? If you've got a lot of goals, being able to see your goal structure and being able to see them like this makes it a lot easier to manage goals for your pages and find them.
Absolutely, and you consider the fact that if you have a multiple, you know, multiple sites in your Sitecore instance, it could get lengthy. And
Yep.
you know, the fact that Corey was able to basically, if you've ever worked in the content editor, you've seen this tree selector list. So it's just to be able to take that and purpose it for goals is fantastic.
But we didn't stop there.
No.
So there's also an attributes icon, page attributes, that lets you select the campaigns, the events, failure actions, and even turn off tracking for a page. So we went as far as going and rebuilding that too to use tree lists. So you can see again on the left side, out of the box, when you're setting campaigns for a page, offline campaigns, as Rick said, it's just again that checkbox list. We've gone and re-implemented that with the tree list control, and again, a lot easier. You can really, like on a fresh Sitecore instance, see the difference and see the benefits. If you go to the events tab, we don't have a screenshot of it here, but out of the box, Sitecore has like, I think 100 page events. So having them actually organized like they are out of the box instead of just that one unorganized list is quite nice. And I gotta say, you know, after implementing this, going back to my day job where we don't have this implemented, and seeing that control, it's just like, wow, this is night and day. Really miss it, and I think this is something that'll really crank up your Sitecore experience.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to having this installed on not just a demo environment and
Right.
being able to use this for setup.
Yep. So how do you get it? This is something you're going to have to work with your devs. This isn't a Sitecore module or anything that you can install. So if you can send your devs to the improved tracking controls link that we've got here at the bottom, this is going to take you to my GitHub account, my GitHub repository, where I'm sharing all the code, all the instructions on how your developers can take this solution and implement it in your Sitecore solution so that you can get your hands on these better controls.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the Path Analyzer. This has been around for several versions and is still a marketer and analyst favorite in Sitecore. Anytime I show the reporting in Sitecore or demo it, you know, the Path Analyzer always ends up being a favorite and certainly a heavily used tool. But I think there's just a few specific things that I would recommend to launch with, and that is certainly getting some paths in place ahead of time. And I'm going to show you this a little bit, but you can really start to go live basically, or if you upgrade, just build in some paths, some custom paths for yourself, so it's not just a gigantic map of your entire site. But let's take a look at this. So first of all, I want to talk about 3 maps that you can build under the Path Analyzer node in the Marketing Control Panel. So if you have ever seen this in the Marketing Control Panel, yes, this is something you as a marketer can use. You can create goal maps. You can create campaign maps. You can create experience maps that allow you to define not just pages, but goals triggered and events along the way. So, you know, this goal here, this Fender Top Shelf, is a goal that I created. Basically, like, all I had to do was say, here's my target goal, give it a name, and here's my target goal. This is a page map, but let's take a look at that. So here it is. One thing to point out, I'll actually go back here. You'll see up at the top under options is I have reverse checked. This is a really cool way to run a goal map where I can see all the traffic leading to the goal, in this case where the goal is in the center. So that's my Fender Top Shelf guitar, people that were looking at top line Fender guitars, all the paths, all the roads that lead to that goal, and the goal is in the center of that universe. The opposite of that, and I had this goal you may have seen under there called, it's the Nags goal, it's a brand of guitar, and this is not reversed. And so in this case, the center is the internet. You see that above the white dot. And basically the goal is located somewhere in the paths reaching out from that. Personally, I love the reverse map, but you know, if you, whatever, might just depend on how you want to look at your traffic as well. Campaign maps, you'll see I have a Fender campaign, is a really powerful way to watch traffic as it relates to the user journey after they trigger the campaign. Very similar setup. I'm just going to click and apply the proper campaign under target campaign. And you can add additional rules if you want to specify persona or some sort of, you know, segment, or I don't know, region or anything else that you can add more scope around that. But basically you can define your campaign and be able to watch that map. It'll look similar to the goal, but this is just the setup for that. And then there's the experience maps that I mentioned. And again, this is more than, think of this more than just pages. So I can, you'll see the options that I can select on what I want, including the channel in this case, and the campaign, and only goals with value and outcomes. So now I'm getting more information than just page information. I'm getting goals triggered and such. So that my path is a little different, where each node isn't necessarily a page, but it's an event, if you will, or it's something that's been triggered. So, and this can, you know, you can filter this down even more granular, but this is a really great way to start to look at your user journeys more high level. So, and I will also say that Path Analyzer is one of those tools that comes with some good extensive out of the box instructions built right into Sitecore. I'd say read it, get to know it. It's very nice. Couple power tips to make things easier for you. You can star your favorites. So if you're basically have certain goals down in that structure that you set up in the marketing control panel, you can star them. You'll see on the upper left where they show up as favorites. Quick way to access that. And then another would be the fact that you may have some common journeys. You can set those up as funnels. So you'll see a funnel that I created in the marketing control panel of somebody going to the effects page. It's the top right here, where I go to the effects page, go to a Black Arts Toneworks Destroyer. It's a guitar pedal, and back to bass guitar. Whether this is legit or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just for demonstration. But basically, I can create that funnel, and then in the Path Analyzer, I can throw a star on that on the left-hand side. You'll see that star next to effects-bass guitars. And then ultimately, when I look at the dashboard in Path Analyzer, I can have that, and I think it's up to 2, show up as my favorites. So imagine you manage a specific channel or a specific user journey. You can have your favorite graphs there of basically user journey showing up right on your executive dashboard. So This is all really something that you as a marketer can do. You're going to build those marketing, those custom paths in the marketing control panel, favorite them. You can deploy. They may take a little time to build. You can ask your devs to accelerate that process, but you don't have to. It doesn't take too long for them to build. And then just verify your maps are working. If you do have any issues and you don't feel like they're working right, that's where you might have your devs look at the logs and see what's going on. But you know, properly set up, they should be working just fine.
Yeah, so next let's take a look at the experience profile and some contact card enhancements that we've introduced. So if you're lucky enough to have a Sitecore 9 or Sitecore 8.2 instance that has contacts that are being identified, then you've probably seen the contact card or the experience profile that looks like this. So out of the box, the experience profile and the contact cards are pretty drab looking. You can see here for this contact, Mr. Bruce Davis Goff, he's a fellow Sitecore MVP. We've got him identified in the system, but yeah, it's just boring. You've got this anonymous kind of contact picture here that, yeah, just kind of sucks your soul away. Yeah, it's just kind of a boring look. So there's actually something quite simple that your developers can do to spruce up the experience profile, and it's all got to do with that avatar there. There's actually a service on the web called Gravatar that you can register for, anyone can. And in fact, if you've registered for WordPress, you've already got a Gravatar account by default. But what it lets you do is it's very simple, just lets you associate an avatar with your email address. So using that service, we can actually go and when identifying someone in the system, we can go to Gravatar and say, hey, give me this email address that we're identifying, give me its picture, and it'll look like this, which is a lot better, right? It's kind of nice being able to actually have some visually identifying thing about the person whose details you're looking at in the experience profile. But what makes Gravatar so cool as a service is there are going to be a lot of people who come and browse your site that you identify that probably don't have an avatar set up on Gravatar. Maybe it's because they're visiting from their business account and they've just not signed up for WordPress with their business email address, or maybe they just don't have a Gravatar account set up, and that's fine. Gravatar actually has a feature where you can tell it to give a unique default image for the email address. And one of the best looking ones, I think in our opinion, is one called RoboHash that looks like this. So you can see it's this lovely little pink robot, and it's really cool again because this is a unique robot for every email address that comes into your system. So this is what Bruce's robot looks like for his email address if he didn't have a Gravatar set up. But if you went and looked at the experience profile of another email address of another user, their robot would look completely different. So again, it's not adding any more data about how the user is interacting with your site, but it does make working in the experience profile a little bit more fun. And plus being able to have these kind of visual cues about who these users are. Maybe you remember this pink robot, you know, it makes Bruce stick in your head better. And if you're working with some kind of external systems like a CRM system, you could actually pull these avatars from Sitecore into that system and have them identified there. The other neat thing about Gravatar is that there are a lot of sites on the internet that use Gravatar. So if you've ever signed up for a service online and your picture was already pulled in for your account, there's a good chance that it was coming from Gravatar. And so other services could use RoboHash, for example, and this exact same unique robot will show up everywhere for this same email address, which is kind of neat. But if you don't like the robot, Gravatar has some other even sillier options like Monster ID. It looks like this, and it's a little bit more low definition, but it's an option you have.
This one looks more like Bruce.
It looks more like Bruce, yeah. But if that's what you want to do, there are a couple of other options to set up. So yeah, this is something that you can work with your devs. It's a pretty easy integration to do. A couple of different ways that your devs can do it. And we'll have a link on how to do that at the end of this section. But yeah, nice little enhancement. The next thing to look at in the experience profile that I think is kind of overlooked is the timeline at the top of the profile. So if you'll direct your attention to the top, you'll see that red line that's going straight across into infinity, and it says unknown contact. It's kind of interesting. The very first time I was working with the experience profile, this timeline kind of tripped me up and confused me, because for someone to show up in the experience profile, they have to be identified. Therefore, they are not an unknown contact. So it's like, why does it say that? Why does it say unknown contact? Well, that's just the default behavior. It doesn't matter if your users are identified or not. In the experience profile, their timeline is always going to start off saying unknown contact, but you can customize all of this stuff. And if you do, it'll look like this. You can change it so that that initial timeline era, as they're called, has a different name. So if you've got an e-commerce solution, like we've kind of got here at the bottom, maybe you want to change that initial anonymous era, as it's called. That's what Sitecore calls it, the anonymous era. Maybe you want to rename that to window shopper, right? Because unknown contact, again, doesn't really make sense. But an e-commerce solution, window shopper might make sense, right? It could be somebody that's logged into your system, but they've never actually bought something. That's how someone always is going to start their journey with your site. So you could rename that to window shopper. And then if you want to trigger changes, which you can do in this timeline, then that's where you need to go back to something that Rick was talking about earlier, which is outcomes. So out of the box, Sitecore will only trigger those timeline era changes that we had on that previous slide if you create outcomes in the marketing control panel that are grouped with lead management funnel. So again, if you want to show those timeline era changes, you have to create outcomes that are set with this lead management funnel group. Then when someone comes to your site and triggers an outcome that's set to that, it'll trigger a timeline era change. So kind of going back to our timeline era example in the slide, you could have it go from window shopper to new customer to gold member to whatever, right? As they kind of maybe become stronger members in your rewards program.
Well, and just to, like ours is a fictional guitar site, right? So we were able to provide meaningful names around that. So you'll see regular, rocker, shredder, rock star. So.
Yeah, just to kind of show the progression as they maybe spend more money at your store, what level of loyalty they are. But you might not want to group your outcomes to that lead management funnel group, right? That might not make sense in your marketing taxonomy, as Rick was talking about earlier. So you can actually work with your developers to implement a really simple change where you go and add a checkbox called show as era, as we've done here. Now this isn't out of the box. It looks like it is, but it's not. And what this will let you do is it'll let you turn any outcome into an era changing outcome. So you check this box, you can change this outcome to be tied to any group that you want that makes sense for your taxonomy. And now when this outcome is triggered for a user, this outcome will trigger those timeline era changes. So that's an easy change that you can implement with your devs to better organize your outcomes.
There is a pitfall, if I remember right, if you forget to assign a group to one of the outcomes. Is that correct?
Yes. So I think Rick said this earlier in the talk. Don't ever forget to assign a group to your outcomes, because if you do, the timeline at the top of the experience profile will go kaput. And you won't know why, and it'll come back to the fact that you didn't set a group on one of your outcomes. So be careful about that. Always set a group on your outcomes.
Always set a group.
Yep, so grab a screenshot of this, kind of recaps what I just talked about. Links at the bottom, custom eras in X profile, that will, you can give that to your devs, and then they can go and implement that checkbox that'll allow you to trigger timeline era changes with any outcome group. And then add Gravatar to experience profile, give that to your devs, and they can go and implement Gravatar in your experience profile and really spice it up for you.
Much nicer experience. All right, so let's talk a little bit about automation. Sitecore does have a robust set of marketing automation tools built in. And not only does 9.3 come with the automation tool that's been around for a couple versions, but it also now comes with a starter set. So I would first, consider picking apart, if nothing else, just from a learning standpoint. They've done a really nice job, even with descriptions, and you can really dig into all the possibilities that are available here. And this is basically, you're going to start really taking advantage of those marketing prerequisites, but you could either retool some of these or extend upon them and just open them up and get to know them. So here's just like one of those templates opened up, and I probably edited this a little bit, but you can really start to see, a cart abandonment flow. And again, it's a good learning place to start, playing and learning the automation tool. Again, I was saying, getting those prerequisites, they're going to matter when you want to get into automation. So you'll see that I've basically set up a Fender top shelf goal trigger. So basically in this case, they completed a goal. The one thing I really just am trying to illustrate here is that I can run marketing automation without even thinking about email. So I could basically start to build something out, and while it can get complicated fast, I can start simple and go from there. But basically, I can start to deliver changes across the site based on people hitting automation points, and personalizing off of that as well. So just by knowing the state that somebody is in, so in this case right now I have a state highlighted, so it's like they're sitting in a 1-day delay. One of the rules that I found fascinating is, if you create a rule on a component, is you can see that there's a marketing automation section of rules that you can apply. And this one, where the contact is currently enrolled and waiting a specific activity on the specific automation campaign, and I've selected that campaign and the section that they're sitting in, I could basically change content. So by knowing where somebody might be in an entire complex marketing automation flow, I can start to personalize content. And this is doing nothing, has nothing to do with email. So it's pretty fascinating what you can do. So you can almost change the site before somebody, hits a certain page, not even off from knowing email, but just kind of knowing what state they're in, kind of almost predictive. So again, that's a pretty simple one. Marketers can start working with it right away. Again, your prerequisites matter. If you do want to start to customize or build out and tie to email, such as Sitecore EXM, you're going to need a developer on that, but they can certainly extend functionality beyond even email and add custom drag and drop elements. So as you see here on the slide, the possibilities are pretty limitless. So very cool. And then personalization presets. This is also something that is very marketer driven, and something that I think definitely, if you're a multi-site user, this is important. But it's something that's been sitting there and allows a lot of flexibility and control, and also can be a way to prevent errors, especially if you have complex rules around your personalization. So let's look at this. If you ever opened up your marketing control panel and just saw the folder that said personalization and opened it up, you'll have seen this predefined rules section. In this case, we've added a little structure to have this up to 11, and we're relegating the rest to the out of the box, but we've created a rule called Fender focused. And you'll see below that what that looks like, where it's just where the Fender top shelf goal was triggered during the current visit. For a second, I just want you to imagine that rule is way more complex, with a lot of ands and ors and a lot of possibilities, but just to fit it on the screen, I kept it simple to get the example across. That's creating that predefined rule that'll be available, which is when you go on the right-hand side to your personalization stack and you're going to select it. At the very top, this has always been sitting there, well, for several versions at least, a thing that says predefined rules. And where the predefined rule is true, you click on that and you define it. So it's where that predefined rule is true, and that rule would basically be Fender focused. So that I can apply that then to a set. I did want to make a comment. Corey, I know we had an issue with the folder structure on here, so I wanted to come back to this slide.
Yeah, so out of the box, Sitecore will only allow you to create predefined rules directly under that predefined rule item. If you want to do the folder structure like we've got here, you'll have to work with your developer. It's a super simple change. We're not talking more than a couple of minutes, but your developers will have to go set up some insert options for you to make it so that you can create those folders and things. But again, it's easy to do, something your developer can do for you.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'd like to point out really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
that rules section that you see down there, just ignore that. That's something from an old version of Sitecore that
Oh,
kind of
yes.
has stuck around as a vestigial item and doesn't do anything. Rick and I spent a lot of time looking into what that thing is and what it's for. It's not used for
Yeah.
anything, so
Yeah.
you can ignore it.
Under the out of the box red don't sign, that rules
Right.
section. So yeah,
Just an FYI.
don't lose sleep over that.
No, don't.
So
we've done that for you.
Right, we've done it for you. Just another service. So again, just to reiterate, we've got this now we're able to take that vendor focused predefined rule and apply it in the rule stack, and you'll see that we're on the personalization component. So where it's vendor focused, show that new vendor content. So again, this is something where where you may want to have control over who has access to sections of rules, or you just you don't want people building their own rules because they could create new errors. So it's just a way to streamline. So think about it from a governance standpoint, think about it from a simplicity standpoint, or an often used, let's call it like your rule presets. It's it's really predefined. So and then the last one, another
But
favorite,
certainly not least,
is an reoccurring pain point for me and customers and anyone I work with, where basically when we get to the point of applying goals, I really end up saying to the marketers that you can apply goals to pages, but anything else you want to do, or you could use Sitecore forms if they're filling out a form, and at the end they could trigger a goal on that. But on anything else, you're gonna need a little developer help. I feel like there was a better option for this. So we worked on something together to try and address this pain point, and it's actually surprisingly simple and not really that deep in development. It's just it's deeper in planning, and that comes with a variant and using a variant of your different components. And let me show you this. So let's first of all talk about some prerequisites, and that is using Sitecore forms. So it's taking advantage of Sitecore forms and basically setting up a button. And I just want to draw a highlight to the settings tab. You could actually select media for the icon. I'm imagining you building a lot of buttons when you see what this tool can do, but consider graphic representation for each goal, so you can add that in. But basically we're going to start to build a button, and we'll define that a little further on this page by basically this is first of all, let me just reiterate, this is a button only form. That's the magic here. We're making a button only form. So first we're going to need to style that.
Yeah, and so for the styling, if you want your button to match the buttons of your other components on your site, there's one place where you're going to have to go work with your devs, because the styling for your buttons can get a little bit complex. You can see here, I'm not even going to try to read that. The CSS class for this button is a mouthful. So just get your devs to supply that to you, and then these buttons will blend right in with other components on your site. But without that, they might look out of place.
Right. And from then, you just go down to the submit actions, and this is the key to this, is you can use, as you always can with Sitecore forms, you can use a button to trigger a goal. So let's do that. And then let's redirect it to a page. So it's going to just feel more like a link. You click on that link on a product, it's going to trigger a goal behind the scenes, and it's going to redirect that user in real time to the next page. You'll see that list on the left-hand side. There's some actions that might, if you find limiting, there's a little more that can be done if you want to go beyond that.
Yep, developers can create custom submit actions very easily. In fact, we did one for our demo site called download media. There's not an option out of the box to download media as a submit action. So again, that's something that's pretty easy for your developers to implement.
Right. So then from there, this is where we're going to, basically, let's consider these promo cards. So in this case, there's your standard promo cards, the 2 on the left and the 1 on the right, or there's a new variant or version. And again, SXA, you could have a different variant. If you're on a non-SXA site, you're just going to have another version of the card. And in this case, we were non-SXA, so we just made a form card. And instead of there being the button built in, it's a placeholder for that form, for that MVC form container. So we'll pull in the MVC form, and after you do that, you're going to define, it's going to create that rendering in there, and you're going to select your data, which will be that form button. And so now you think about this, it's basically any button that is on your site, or any component they have set up this way. It's really going to be about planning ahead of time when you're architecting your components to determine that, which components you want a button version of. But now I can trigger a goal, an outcome, or any actions you want to define in Sitecore. So as long as you think ahead, goodbye are the days of needing to go back to development to add goals and outcomes and click actions. And so I was very excited about that. I think that this pretty much deserves a little celebration. So yeah. So again, there's the development in this is really around the components and creating them. The form button and the submit actions are largely there. You might need to make a custom submit action, but you're still just building those buttons. Again, I recommend creating icons for them, maybe iconography around that, but get those built in, and you're really going to eliminate an entire bucket of requests for your developers every time you want to add a goal by creating this functionality. So with that, we want to say thank you. This is the socials for both of us. You can find us both certainly on Slack and Twitter, and Corey certainly is available on Stack Exchange, and as you also have learned from this, GitHub.
Yep, that's right.
So I hope you feel that there were some useful items that you want to go run into your developers or running a tryout. But again, we want you to use this whether you are a Sitecore veteran or you're getting ready to launch. Consider some of these ways to make the experience a little better out of the gate, or just to improve your day-to-day in Sitecore. So thank you again.
Thank you.